Happy 2020, everybody. Thank you so much for the response to the podcast being back overall. It's just been incredible to get the DMs and get the emails from all of you. We've got a few more mentor sessions that just kind of popped up out of nowhere. It was really, really cool. Just got back from Creative Summit where I taught on SEO. SEO for dummies, because I feel like which one I think is claiming that I'm a dummy, which is fine. I'll take that. Super cool to do that and kind of teach the basics of SEO. You know, I'm super passionate about it. It's free and you can work on it anytime you want. Like that's the best thing ever. And we're just excited. 2020 has this feeling of passion. So today I have a guest on who is super near and dear to me over the last few months, recently getting to know this guy. And he's just been a valuable resource for me, a gentle, kind dude who is super helpful and at the same time has the strong hammer of advice, if you will. And that's kind of my favorite person, if you will. And so I love this guy, Sam Stroud. He's an incredible photographer based out of the DMV, DC, Virginia area, and he manages a team of 7 photographers shooting like 130 weddings a year, just killing the game. You know, some of y'all are like, oh, I'd like to book 30 weddings a year or 13, you know, even 10%. But he's just the man and absolutely killing it. So without any further ado, here's Sam Stroud. What's up, dude? How's it going?
Good. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. And you actually sound good. I'm always nervous when people are like, yeah, I have my own mic. I'm like,
I did a podcast for a long time, so.
Really? I think I saw this. I was like Googling some stuff about you, and yeah, I think I saw something. So tell me about that.
Well, initially it started out as like, it's probably along the same lines of something you're doing. It's been a while. Gosh, I probably did it 2.5 years ago or so.
Okay.
And I loved it. It was great. It was fun. And it really got fun as the more interviews we did. And I had a host, and it honestly just became this big beast that I just didn't like want to manage anymore.
Sure. 100%.
Yeah. So I'm sure you can relate to that. So eventually I was just like, I'm done.
I totally get that.
So I stopped doing it and
still have some gear.
Yeah, that's right. And so I still have I have like a soundboard and all this stuff left over. So
that's awesome. Well, I appreciate it. This is going to be like the best sounding podcast of 2020 so far.
Oh, I don't know about that.
I'm into it. I'm so into it, dude. I was on a podcast one time and with another photographer, of course, and super great guy, really incredible guy. I love his kind of like podcast mission. Very cool. I would say it's much more polished, where I feel like this. I mean, now I tried doing some of the episodes where I'm like, hey, I want every episode to just have like a goal at the end. And then I realized that I was like losing the realness of that. And I was like, well, yeah, we're going to I want to go a little bit more on the kind of like the Joe Rogan, where I'm like, I want to have a conversation and you'll probably learn something, but I think you'll get to learn from 2 experts talking or whatever. But, nonetheless, this guy interviewed me and he's like, oh, kind of the same thing we just did. He's like, oh, you sound so good. This is great. And, I had him on my podcast like a few weeks later, and his audio was really bad, and I was like, "Bro, what happened?" And
no!
He's like, "You should have told me." I was like, I thought that you were." What were you gonna say? Sorry, you cut out.
Yeah. No. I was gonna say that I think it's interesting. You can have like the greatest content in the world, but if it sounds terrible, no one's gonna listen to it.
Yeah, exactly. There's an element, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. I mean, you were talking about it being a conversation. The first like 5 or 6 episodes that we did were really rough. In fact, we had like 4 in the can that I was like, I'm not releasing those. They're just not. They were hard. I realized like I'm not a great interviewer. I'm not a great interviewer, but I can have a conversation with somebody.
Sure. Exactly.
So that's the kind of the route we went. So I would have these conversations with these other photographers. And then my, I guess, co-host, quote unquote, we would dissect the conversation. But a lot of times it sort of devolved or spiraled into just he and I joking back and forth about whatever.
Yeah.
But it was still good. It was still fun. But anyway, yeah, I'm not doing it anymore.
I love that. Well, hey, that's a cool story. So I want to get into this here. We'll just keep going, man. This is fun. I heard about you. I feel like this episode is going to come out after Creative Summit, but we both got asked to speak at this cool conference called Creative Summit.
Right.
And I think at the time that I got asked, I don't even know how a lot of that stuff works. I've only spoken at like 4 things. So, so at the time they were like, hey, here's our guest list, or here's who else is speaking. And, there's like 7 or 8, right? Like as they're building in people. And,
right.
And I was like, cool, I'll just go follow all these people on Instagram and see what they're about. And,
right.
And you stood out to me. I was like, oh, this guy's killing it. I like his work. It's like very like there's something to be said about, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, as kind of the other conversations we've had of like, there's something to be said for like consistency and just like, I feel like your work is very much, and especially given the background with associates, and I'm not sure what gets posted on Instagram, but the reality I see is like, hey, we're going to put this out every time. And this is hopefully this like romantic, cool look that Sam Stroud is doing. And hopefully that, is recognizable. And at least I feel like it is. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's like Sam's thing. And then the night shots, of course, which I'm like, yes.
Oh, thanks, man.
Which I'm still waiting on workshop info for.
Yeah, it's coming. I promise.
It's
We're building up a big back end of that. But it's funny you say the Instagram thing, because today I posted something and I was like, ooh, this is really different than what I normally post.
Yeah, the bride laughing and having a good time.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think it's one of the things that I focus. It's not one of the things. It is the other thing that I focus on a lot, or us as a team, we focus on a lot. Like when we do our pitch to our bride and groom, it's very much like, hey, we're very hands off. But if you look at our Instagram, that sort of tells a different story. It's like, it's very procured. It's very controlled. The lighting is very, like, everything's very specific and intentional.
Yeah.
But what I've discovered is that's such a small portion of the work that we do on a day. I see those images like the one I posted today, and she's just having the best time of her life. And I feel like other people need to see that. And oftentimes I show that in Instagram stories. Like once I'm ready to deliver a gallery, I'll put up, it's kind of becoming a joke where I'll post like 30 or 40 images in a Insta story gallery, and then I'll immediately get a text or a message from a bride that's like, oh, my images are ready, because they are ready. Like, I'm uploading them, and then I opted to go ahead and throw these on Instagram as well.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I'm interested to see, like, I was a little nervous posting that today, but it felt good because it's been a while since I felt nervous about doing something wedding photography related.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of those things. Yeah. Especially for you. It's like a lot of, portraits in general. And I feel like that's what, photographer wise, that's where a lot of photographers feel like, hey, this is where I have the most control, can execute my vision. And thus what you're seeing is, the closest thing to what I want to create, what I'm the best at creating, given the right variables. And, so if you like this, then we'll align, versus like if I ever post a flat lay on my Instagram, you should call me and be like, Adam, are you okay? Because I just feel like this is not, it's something I'm trying to get better at it, just for the sake of fun, for photography, for the sake
I hate it, dude.
Yeah. I'm just like, oh, this is one giant page of materialism. No.
Yeah.
Like, and I like all that stuff, but it's just one of those things where it's just so, there are people laughing and having a wonderful time while I'm in some hotel Hampton Inn bedroom, shooting these shoes, and like grandma's coming in. Yeah. And I'm just like, all right, cool. And I guess it helps with features. And like, I have a little PR contractor who helps me out a little bit, and she's like, hey, it'd be cool if you had some details. I'm like, I know, girl, I know, but I'm like, listen, look at all these people having a good time at the reception, or like, look at the couple, like, I got this, this mom's tear with my new Sony, like, look at this. She's like, people don't care about that. I'm like, oh, that's the worst.
No. Yeah, I think what we discover, and maybe I'm speaking too broadly, is like, the wedding industry is definitely consumer driven. And that makes me crazy. But it is what it is. But I think what we find, at least I hope, is that once you hand over the gallery, the people complaining about not getting the shot they want are the planners and the floral people. And I want to do that. Like, I want to provide a service for other people in the industry as well, for other service providers. I want to be able, like, there are just a few that I absolutely love. And then there are some that I don't love that I'm like, oh, I can't believe I have to do this, but I'll do it. But I think ultimately, like, the bride and groom are the ones who get super excited about those shots you're describing, where it's like grandma and dad and sister, and like everybody's just having a great time, or there's like this emotional moment, and all of this stuff with like the flowers and the dress and the shoes. While they might like want that and they appreciate it, I think ultimately what you find is, or at least what I find, maybe I shouldn't be speaking for everybody, is that my clients are like super, super grateful for the images you've got that are not detail oriented, like the lay flats or flat lays or whatever you call them. Dude, I maybe I shouldn't say this, but I detest that stuff. And I've gone as far as to tell planners, like, look, I will shoot that in the most humblest of ways, by the way. I'm not like a diva by any means.
Yeah. You don't have to be humble here.
Right. I'll say, listen, I'm not great at this. So if you want me to shoot it, I would have you design it and then I'll shoot it.
Yep.
Or I have a couple of photographers that work for me that are just phenomenal at it. And so if I know it's a insane wedding with, we had one a couple months ago at a venue here in Virginia that's just ridiculous. And I brought her specifically to shoot details. Like, your job is to shoot details. RJ and I are going to photograph the people. You can photograph the things. And that's what she's really good at photographing people, but she's really good at the details.
That's awesome.
I hate it. I absolutely hate it, man. That's the moral of the story I'm telling right now.
No, totally.
I see shoes and dresses and I just don't connect to it.
Yep, 100%. I get it. It's I think that happened for me last year. Well, I got spoiled the first time. I feel like a lot of wedding photographers are on this similar path, and you can attest to this. Is like, even with my, I don't feel like I'm in the same weird photography world as, say, like a Sam Hurd or a Jason Vincent by any means. That's like not my vibe. Love those guys, both podcast guests, but I'm also not a light and airy, very pretty kind of style, but I'm still learning, over the past 2 years, as we've had like a lot more growth. We're working with luxury planners, we're working in luxury buildings, and it's very new to me. And I'm just like, I love it. And I'm glad it's happening one weekend at a time rather than just every day.
Right.
But it's one of those things where, it's trying to gauge, what does my client want and what do they need? But all that to say, I had 2 or 3 planners last year that I came into the getting ready space and everything was styled and ready to go. And I was like, oh, I love you so much. Like, this is the greatest thing. Like, I don't have to care. Like, of course you're going to like it. Of course you're going to post it. Like, as long as I light it well, most likely you'll enjoy it. I did have one who's like, her Instagram feed is very organized and,
right,
my whites weren't white enough, but like, nonetheless, at the end of the day, she really enjoyed it. It was great. It got featured. Like, everything worked out. And, I was like, this is what you're good at. Like, this is awesome. And I feel like photographers in general, I mean, I've had 2 mentor sessions this weekend or this week where I've talked to my mentees, and we start out this, any craftsman or service person starts out doing this thing, right? Like, whether you build benches, whether you install kitchens, whether you do photography, whatever.
Right.
And then the process of freelancing or owning a business is, I have to do 35 other things and be kind of good at those. The first one, I was telling one of my mentees, I was like, it sucks that you kind of have to be a computer nerd these days to be a photographer. So it's like, hey, back up your images. Like, do you have stuff in 2 places? And then like, number 10 is like, hey, you don't have to be a crazy people person, but if you can kind of pretend to be friendly over email, it might go further, whatever.
Right.
And just like all these little things. And, again, this is 10 minutes on flat lays and people are like, all right, I'm out of this. This is stupid, but I did not intend this.
Yeah,
but
not interested.
I like the organic vibe of this. And, but it's just nice to have somebody be like, hey, I'm good at styling events. I'm styling this event and I'm styling this thing for you. And you'll photograph it the same way you'll photograph the reception when it's set up. I'm like, cool. Yeah. Like, I didn't have to put a plate down. I didn't have to put a candle down in a certain spot. Like, that is just not my expertise. And
I feel like it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, 100%. Especially, I feel like, and you know this, in DC, it's just like competition is strong. If there was a flat lay competition, I'm coming in last. I'm just like the fat kid at the end of the marathon. And you know, but DC is very. I feel like there are a lot of luxury. There's a spot for it. There's a luxury location where some couples like that. They love this legacy. They're in the old 1930s car coming outside the mansion. Which is cool. Yeah. And I love that stuff. But I think that those clients, planners, like the big teams, if you will, where it's like the same photographer works with the same planner, works with the same florist, and they are like, hey, this is our tribe. We do 17 weddings a year. That's it. Don't touch us, you know, and and it works, and it's awesome. And then, I had a bride last year that was like, Adam, if you take a photo of my rings and my shoes, I'll kill you. And I was like, I love you so much.
Oh, that's the best.
Yeah, she's just like, this is.
I had a bride last week or 2 weekends. Oh gosh, they all run together. It was a week or 2 weekends ago, and she legitimately all she said is like, look, I just want one photo. That's it. And I was like, wait, what? And I would always joke with, it's not a joke. It's maybe a naive thing to say, but I truly believe that like one day I'm going to get to the point to where I'm at a wedding and I've taken one photo and it's like the greatest photo ever to them, not to anybody else, but to them.
Sure.
And, it is sort of a half joke, like, oh, okay, that's never going to happen. And I guess realistically it'll never happen. But I was like, okay, well, we can do this at the reception. And then if you want to, she was like, look, all I really want is this one photo. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I mean, you've hired me for all day. I mean, I can photograph other stuff too. And of course she wanted that stuff, but she was like making it very clear to me that like, if none of that works out, the one photo is all she cares about. And I was like, well, I can do that for you.
Yeah. I mean, most clients, this is, I feel like this is good education. Most clients, whether they will say it or not, have like something in their mind, and and it might just be a feeling, right? And so they see that in our work and they're like, okay, yeah, cool, Sam's work feels like this, Adam's work feels like this. Or it might just be one photo or two photos and they're like, hey, I would love a photo of my grandpa and I dancing together. And you're like, oh, cool, got this. Like I always tell the story. This was kind of like a fun learning experience for me, just to help. And now I tell my mentees this is like, just dive deeper when a client says something, because, they might not know, you might not be on the same playing field. And I had a bride, it's like 2 days before the wedding, and she said, hey, just wanted to send you over a few shot ideas. And now I would kind of like roll my eyes, but at the time I was like, okay, cool, great. Just Pinterest page or whatever. And this is like 5 years ago. And the one photo is like this epic, 14 millimeter crazy photo of a bride with her, her dress laying down on all the steps and all that jargon, and what looks like her dad, and I was like, huh, and it like, I was just more curious, and so I email her back and I'm like, oh, cool, this is so great, thank you so much. I would love to know a little bit about why you chose these photos, or what are you looking for in these, and just out of like, I wanted to figure it out. I wanted to see if we were on the same playing field. And she goes, oh, I just want a photo of me and my dad.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, well, duh. Like, of course, but again, that was one of those things where, on my side, I think, obviously now we do a lot, like client education is such a big thing in wedding photography. And I like it. I like, I was telling my mentee this morning, like set the tone. Like I want to be in charge of kind of the vibe. So I give my clients like a sample family formal list. I'm like, hey, if you don't want to make it up, here's a basic one that will make most moms happy, but make brides not as stressed. Like we can get it done in 30 minutes. And
exactly.
And but yeah, at the time I did no client communication, so I was just like, of course I would shoot the bride and her dad, and then I was like, oh well, yeah, it was so funny. But I love that was like, that was an epiphany for me, where it was like, oh, like she. Yeah. Just pinned a photo of a bride and a dad that looked pretty, and I was like, oh, cool. Right. We got this, fam.
Right. I can do that.
Yeah. We can take it. So tell me about Sam Stroud. Like we've talked about a little bit offline, or I guess online, but like, outside of podcast land, about your team and associates and, taking like 1,700 weddings a year.
So
tell me a little bit about you, like give me the background of like how you started and then where you're at. Cause I mean, now you have 6 or 7 people on your team.
Right.
And I don't even want to know, tell me how many weddings that turns out to be in a year. And yeah, give me the background on Sam.
A lot. Yeah. So I was working as a engineer basically. But prior to having a 9 to 5, like as a hobby, I was taking photos, shooting a lot of film. I was terrible at it, absolutely terrible at it. And my wife got pregnant, and I thought, well, this will be maybe a good way to make some extra money. So if she doesn't want to work or wants to cut back, she can. We'll have the option of that. I wanted to leave that door open. And at the time, 2 of my buddies had a pretty successful wedding photography business. And I was living in DC at the time. So I shot a little bit for them, second shot a little bit for them. And then when we moved to Lynchburg, where I'm at now, my wife actually, we were talking about the story the other day. She doesn't remember it, but she handed me, there's a local, it's basically a book full of ads, but there are articles in there and all that stuff. But she said, hey, this guy's work's pretty awesome. And his name's Adam Barnes, and he's still a photographer.
Yeah.
He's amazing. He's incredible. He's a great guy. He and I used to work out together, but I am in a different area now. But anyway, she said, you should go knock on his door and see if he needs a second shooter. So I legitimately went and knocked on his door and said, look, I don't know a lot about this. I'd like to know more about this. I'd love to do work for you. So if you are looking for somebody, I'm your guy. And he basically was like, yeah, sure. Why don't you come along? And when I got there, this is funny. And the irony of this is also pretty hilarious. I'll get to that in a second. But anyway, I get there and his second shooter is just looking at me like, who are you? Why are you here? And I want you dead. And what I had come to find out was that's not what she was thinking. She just has what's the RBF? She just has that face where she looks like she wants to murder you. But ironically, she ended up becoming one of my shooters. She ended up becoming one of my photographers. She's super talented. But anyway, so that's how it kind of started. Adam really pushed me. And I think if you asked him, he'd be like, no, I didn't really do that. I didn't really like actively push him into it. And that may be true, but he had really encouraged me like, hey, you have a gift. You're good with people. You could do this if you wanted to do it. And in fact, he helped me book one of my first weddings. He was a groomsman in one of my first weddings. And that was a whole like nerve-wracking experience to try to photograph a wedding that you knew established, talented photographer was in that wedding. That was so hard. Yeah. Like you've shot weddings, I'm sure, where people have come up to you and they're like, hey, I'm also a photographer. And you're like, oh, I'm sure you are,
yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
And just kind of smiled and like, sweet, sick, good. I'm going to keep shooting, but thanks. But he legitimately, is a talent, a true talent. And knowing that he was in the wedding was really hard for me, but I got through it. And when I got through it, I was like, yo, this is sick. I love this. I absolutely love it. So I put forth like all energy, resource, time, everything I could into building this business. And with a lot of help at the time, I had a guy that shot with me. He now has a 9 to 5 at a different job. So we don't really work together anymore, but he really, really helped me in developing this idea of associate shooters. I remember we sat down one time and he said, look, there's money in what you're doing. He said, but the real money is in being able to multiply yourself across multiple platforms. Yeah. So the moment you say no, you're saying no to revenue. And while I think you and I both would agree, there are times when you need to say no, but I don't like saying no. In fact, if we have a date, I don't know how your October 17th is looking, but we're slammed. Like we've got 5 weddings booked on that day.
Oh my gosh.
2 on the 16th and 3 on the 18th. So RJ, guy who's been shooting with me for a while, was like, so what are you going to do if someone books with you on the 7th or wants to book with you on the 17th? I'm like, man, we're maxed out. But there's a part of me that's like, I don't know. We'll figure it out. I'll just say yes and we'll figure it out. That's sort of my mentality a lot of times. Like, I'm not going to stress it. We'll figure it out. But That I'm joking. That goes against what we really believe in terms of associate shooters. But anyway, so that's kind of how things, I like I said, a 9 to 5, started out with like 5 or 6 weddings. And then the next year it exploded to like 25 or 30. I forget the exact number. And I had to make the decision, am I going to do this full time, or am I going to cut back and just do it on the side? I went to my wife and I said, I think I want to do this full time. Like, this is the time, let's do it.
Yeah.
She was pregnant, so it probably wasn't the time. She was pregnant with my son. And so I put my 2 weeks in. I'm sorry, not 2 weeks. I knew the lead time on hiring for somebody for what I did at the time was like 45 days. So I was like, all right, 2 months. I'm quitting in 60 days. But I didn't think about I'm quitting in October. So the wedding season dies down. You have November, December, January, February, March. I did nothing. And I was like, what was I thinking? It was a really scary time for us. I really didn't plan that well. And the next year, I think it went from like 30 to 60 weddings. And then I started bringing on more and more and more talent to kind of help me with this idea of associate shooters. But I had some, like, I think a lot of people, they give credit where credit is certainly not due. I've been asked, you and I talked about this associate, and I have to humbly admit, like, I was prepped for this through like a corporate gig, like I worked as a team leader, as a manager of people. So I already understood what it took to build a team. It's not like I knew, oh, this is what you do. It's a really basic formula. I think I just understood at a very like sterile place, like a 9 to 5. Like, it was an insurance company that I worked in IT for. We were building out projects for this massive insurance company, but it's translated really well into this. And I'm thankful for that, but it's not like I'm reinventing the wheel here. You know what I mean? Sure.
No, totally. It's one of those things that I think that was kind of my idea, or not my idea, but it made sense to me. It like clicked when I just realized that, it can happen. Like, and I think too, is at least in DC, I know lots of photographers who are super talented and great with people, and they just suck at business, or they just can't handle it, or they don't want the stress. And, so they have their 9 to 5, or they work at the Pentagon or whatever. And, because you can't, in DC, at least, you just can't half-ass it because cost of living is so high. And no offense to like Iowa or, Wisconsin or something like that. Like, you might have a chance of being like, I only booked 8 weddings this year, and most of them were at $2,500, and I'm shooting a little bit of other stuff, and I live with my boyfriend, and it's cool, or girlfriend, and so I think it's cool to kind of see, like, those are the people for me. I know, as we're literally at the time of this episode, like, we're about to announce that we're accepting applications for associates, and I have people in mind that I'm like, hey, you would be awesome. But it's one of those things, right? That just like, it has to work out and have to figure that out. And, but I really think, as you and I have talked too, it was like a good reminder where, it's not just money. I think for me, I've gotten a few emails back the last 2 years, which is why I was kind of into it, where one, I felt bad saying no, right? I'm like, okay, well, this sucks. Like, we turned down a lot of weddings, or we were a smidge over budget for a lot of these weddings, especially for myself. Like, that's the recipe if you want to stay by yourself. I'm like, hey, well, keep raising prices. Like, if you're popular, like, go for it. And so I was on this journey of doing this, but I was like, man, looking at the data, I use Tave, so I was like able to look at it, and it was like in 2019 alone, we turned down 80 weddings because we were already booked, and then almost another 100 because we were out of budget. And I was like, even if I could book 25% of this, even if I could book just a smidge of this, provide somebody else with an awesome income, retirement savings, whatever they're looking for in life, creative fulfillment. And, these couples can also, have something that aligns with, them and their mission and the brand. The whole reason that they reached out to Mason Photography or Sam Stroud is like, no, I already know that they know what I'm looking for. And that's when it clicked for me. It was like, my couples, I feel like, are looking for me and they say, hey, you really vibe with us, it seems really cool, and then it might just be like, hey, we literally can't afford you. Like if we go test drive a Ferrari, I will probably vibe with it, but I'm not buying that Ferrari.
Right.
I'm like, sorry, I had to get the Civic, or whatever. And, it hurts, but you're like, okay, yeah. And, I think value can go a little bit, a long way, and sales can go a long way. But I just felt like I was missing these people who were passionate about me, or like I said, we were already booked, and you're not saying no to $2,500. You're saying no to $8,500, and you're like, oh my gosh, or whatever.
Yeah.
So,
or a lot more. I mean, what's really cool, and I think what you'll see as you build out is, I mean, gosh, over the last 2 weeks, I don't know how many inquiries we've gotten, but I know for a fact 5 or 6 of them are like, hey, is RJ available? Is Ellie available? Is Mitchell available? Is Tyler? Like, that is a great feeling, because that means those people care. Number one, the people that you've hired or have brought on care as much as you do. They're doing as good a job as you would do. And what you're building it's working. These people are, it hurts my feelings a little bit because my name's on the business. Like, well, I mean, I could shoot your wedding, I'm talented too, but I love that. I love that, I get specific reviews from brides, hey, Mitchell was incredible. RJ did X, Y, and Z for me. I got an email the other day about RJ, and we brought this new guy on, Adam, last year. And he's the nicest guy in the world, like, great guy. And him and RJ together are just a fantastic team. And she emailed me and just was like, they went above and beyond. We're talking even further than just photography. I was thirsty, and Adam went and got me a drink, and it just was little things like that they paid attention to. And I was just like, this is what I'm talking about. Like, if you can create, I tell people all the time, this might hurt a lot of coffee people's feelings, but I love the Starbucks Americano. And one of the reasons I love it is because I know exactly what it tastes like, no matter where I go. Like, I don't know how many times I've gone to a coffee shop in Charlottesville or DC or Florida or wherever we're traveling that weekend, and I'm just like, this Americano blows. But I know that I can go to Starbucks and get Americano, and it's exactly what I want. I think, while trying not to show off that we're like some giant corporate entity, because that's not the vibe I want. But what I want to be able to do is say, I can give you me in the form of somebody else. I'm not that special. Like, this person over here is also kind of a cool guy and also really talented. And that's the hard part, right? Like, I think you would agree, photographers as a whole, you've probably met some really weird people that are wedding photographers. You're like, wow, how do you can barely function, face to face? How do you shoot a wedding? So when you find somebody, I think of Mitchell, this guy that works for me, and we joke, he looks like Zac Efron. So like when he walks in the room, everybody in the room is like, oh my gosh, that's the most attractive man ever.
I'm going to have to change my my application now. I'm going to I need to submit a headshot, please.
I need a Zac Efron. Yeah, I need a Zac Efron on my team. But he just has this way of like putting everybody at ease. I'm super laid back. One of the things I think that weddings has taught me over the last few years is that I was too laid back. So, it sort of calibrates you a little bit.
Sure.
But Mitchell has this way of like getting things done, but doing it in a way like the building could be on fire. And Mitchell's like, yeah, we got this. He's just got this way about him. He's definitely the guy you want when things go wrong. But I think that's cool, man. I think I'm excited for you. I really hope that takes off.
Yeah, I hope so too. It's you'll probably be getting more emails from me. No,
no, I'm fine with that. Listen, I've been a champion of when I first started. Like I said, Adam Barnes was very, very open with me about a lot of his business practices, and I just think, I've had people tell me, "Man, you should be doing courses," and I tried for a while, and I liked it, and I made money. It was fun. It was fine, but I think I find a lot of value in providing help for people that need it. Now, I will say this, like, you open yourself up to being taken advantage of course. Like, and I've seen it happen, man. I've just recently had similar conversations with, the conversation you and I have been having over email.
Yeah.
And this person just basically took everything I said and is selling it to other people.
What?
And I was like, sick, dude. All right.
Oh my gosh. I'm the opposite.
But
so
here's the thing.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. Like, I did my part. He has to be, he's the one that has to wake up tomorrow morning and look himself in the mirror and go, I'm cool with who I am.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Like,
yeah.
I'm not gonna punish other people who I'm not gonna punish Adam Mason who genuinely needs help and wants help to build something to better his life and others because this one guy was a dick about it. I mean, it is what it is. There's not much you can do about that.
Yeah, that's a good policy. I'll say two things which will probably make you laugh. I think one, for me, I think how I started photography in my business was I think I just watched like a Gary Vee video about it, and he's not like my favorite person, but I don't mind him at all. And but his thing was like keep asking.
Right.
And when I first got into cameras in 2010, 2011, one, I had access to photographers. I worked at the Apple store, so and that was when every employee was cool. Nowadays they'd be like, "Hi, welcome to this retail space." But back then there was like 10 photographers, 10 audio guys, 10 musicians, whatever, and I could pick their brains a little bit and I guess too, because we already had the relationship, and I think that's a big thing. And, I think talking to you, one, I'm secretive about this thing anyway, because it's scary to me at some level.
Yeah.
And so I'm asking, I've literally had those emails that I sent to you with 5 other, studios, and kind of picking, 20% here, 35% here, 25% here, and putting it together and be like, all right, what will Adams look like? And, I think I'll tell you, when I sent you the emails to you, the last conversations I had about kind of associate and building a team and having photographers under you, was kind of the opposite of what I feel like I want to do. And you reminded me of, and just like, hey, does this align with your brand? Does this align with who you are? Because these guys, they're running it out of scarcity and fear, and like they had gotten screwed over by multiple photographers that worked for them, and didn't fulfill what they were doing, and so their approach was like, have everything, every single detail, and I love contracts, and we'll have them, and we've got them ready to go, but they were like, you need to make it even more and more and more strict, similar to kind of like what I sent you, and even in doing that, I was only doing it in a sense of, okay, yeah, that sounds good. I don't want to get screwed. But the reality was like, yeah, that doesn't fit my brand. And like, I'm assuming I'm building a business based off of, or business model based off of what 5% of people might do, like the 5% of terrible people, and not what 95% of people might do, which is like, oh yeah, I shot this wedding for Adam, and yeah, I work for his company. You should check him out. Rather than like, yes, would you like me to be your photographer? And the second thing I'll tell you is I had a similar experience. I'll tell you in a few weeks too. I was asked to be on a podcast, and the email correspondence to be on the podcast was word for word the same of what I sent you to be on the podcast. And these people were former guests of mine that were on the podcast, because I was like, hey, I really respect you. I respect your work. I love what you've built. Seldom do I view most of the people I ask to be on even as a peer. I if anything, I view them as like there is a niche expertise that I'm trying to dig out and feel what it is. And and this guy, he's busy, he's doing some stuff, but he asked me to be on his podcast, and I just, first thing I said, I was like, bro, I'll happily come on the podcast, man, but you got to change your emails, man. And he was like, I didn't think you would notice. I was like, bro, I notice everything. And,
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's awkward.
He apologized a decent amount to where I was like, okay, yeah, but I was like, still, man, like you just ripped these things that I worked on, and I this is my baby, my thing. This, as we talked about at the beginning of the episode, this is my not making that much money podcast.
Yeah, I don't understand that. I honestly don't. Like, I don't get how people can just lift and rip stuff off like that. Yeah. So blatant. I mean, I don't think anybody's doing anything like, even people in our industry, I think, who are viewed as like, oh, these are innovators, there's no real true innovation going on. I feel like Sam Hurd is like, I feel like I once told him, I was like, dude, you're like a mad scientist. You're like this really technical, you're doing all this really interesting stuff, but it's just all stuff that he's compiled together. It is original. Like, it's his thing, of course.
Yeah.
And then you have all of the other people who are doing what Sam Hurd is doing. And it's just so interesting to me. I don't think it's a direct ripoff, but when you're talking about like what you're talking about, where you send an email to somebody and then they send it exactly back to you, or I'm sure you've heard of like photo stealers.
Yep.
Right. Like that's that whole movement of like people who are out to look for people. I got an email a couple times. I've actually gotten an email from photo stealers 3 times. The first time it was like, hey, we want to make you aware this person has stolen your work. And at first I was really mad. I was like, what the heck? And I went and looked at it and I was like, well, what do you do? And then I was kind of like, I wasn't really cool with kind of how they were handling the photo stealer. I was like, I don't know, guys, like maybe you just tell them, hey, we know you're stealing, like take it down.
Yeah.
The second time they sent it to me, I responded back like, I personally don't really care if they want to use my work in that way. Again, back to what I said earlier, they have to be the ones that have to justify when they don't reproduce the quality work for their client.
Yep.
And then the third email I got from photo stealers was, we know you don't care. We just thought we'd make you aware of it. I was like, you're right. I don't care. Have a good day.
That's good to know. Yeah, exactly. That's that makes perfect sense though. Yeah. There's nothing, at least for me, I feel like there's an element of, I'm looking for this as well in the people that we're going to hire, is a level of humility, which where like, I don't think I'm doing anything new under the sun. I don't think that there's an approach to what I'm doing. I think like it's 2020. We know the things that are good and we know the things that matter. And it's like loving and serving people and creating work that makes people feel those things. And, and it's like, we just have to be, and what people are looking for, how you eliminate fears through consistency and trust. So it's like, as a brand, that's what we're actually making. And when your Instagram feed is all gorgeous stuff that you can do easily, like this effortless mastery, and you're like, okay, this is what I can do every time. And a client's like, oh, it's portrait time? Hell yeah, let her rip. Like, I know it's going to make it happen.
Do it.
And they know what to expect, whereas somebody steals your work, they're going to be like, Sam had the, stars of Virginia and we're in backcountry, wherever, and it's not working. So yeah.
It used to really bother me. Yeah. I've had a couple times, other photographers reach out to me and say, hey, have you seen so-and-so's work? It's, in fact, it was probably 4 years ago. I used to incorporate a lot of drone, like overhead shots.
Sure.
And I reached out to this guy, who was doing it more commercially with clients of businesses, where he was photographing these people, overhead. And I was like, gosh, I've never seen that. I haven't seen that in the wedding world. Like, I'd love to do that. So I reached out to him and I said, hey man, I'd love to sort of incorporate my own ideas into that similar concept. I hope that doesn't bother you. And he was really flattered. And I thought that was really cool. He was really gracious about it. And like, man, I'm telling you, not 3 weeks later, there were other photographers in my area specifically doing it. I'm not saying I'm the father of the overhead drone shot. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But like, it was even things like the way that you pose them, where you pose them. And I legitimately had to like, I was upset. I texted a photographer and was like, yo, this is really shitty. Like, what are you doing? and then I realized, like, why do I care? I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, for a second, it was reactionary. And so I've had those moments where, and in your situation, I probably would have been really upset too. Like, hey, I had you on as a guest, like sort of in good faith that we were going to talk and share ideas and create this thing together. And now you're using my platform to do the same thing.
Yep.
Like, what the hell, man?
Yeah. And I think the best part about it is I'm at this point now where, I obviously, mentioned, I wouldn't say that I didn't care, but I I wanted to be like happy and clever about it, if you will. And so, you know, that's how I kind of told him, and he was like, bruh, you know, and I was like, yeah, man, like I noticed. And, and it was just like a really good, and that's how it should be. I mean, if you and I were close friends or whatever, and like you have something in your teeth or you said something that was, you know, I'm not sure, whatever, like, I kind of come from that world where I was like, I would like to tell you about it. And in theory, you're the kind of guy that's like, oh, I like feedback on myself, actually, in general. And so for this guy, it was a good kind of funny thing. So tell me, I want to know, we've talked a little bit about associates and brands and all kinds of stuff. So how many weddings did you do in 2019? I just want to know from give people a perspective of what that looks like. You have 7, 8 photographers.
Yeah.
And how many is that last year?
Let me pull this up. I know.
Do you use a CRM or something?
What's that?
Do you use like a CRM or Tave or Honeybook or anything?
Yeah, we use Honeybook right now.
Okay.
Yeah, we use Honeybook right now.
Nice.
So it's got all of that reporting. I'm pulling it's kind of slow. I'll say this. I know that 2018, it was like the 100 mark. It was more than that. 2019, it was probably pretty close, 120, 125.
Okay.
So it's a lot. And it's me editing all of it. I don't hand it off to anybody.
Yeah.
We've kicked around the idea of hiring editors, you know, content like creators aside. We need somebody to sometimes come in and maybe call everything. And in fact, one of the best lessons I've learned from a really close friend who's a great artist and photographer was you should not be culling your own work. I think with weddings, it's a little different because there are just things you have to have.
Yep.
But I think you can instill that in a color or an editor and say, look, these have to stay, but there are images that I'm emotionally attached to that you may objectively be able to look at and go, that's not a great image. So in fact, I often send my Instagram posts to other photographers and say, hey, what do you think about this shot? My own photographers. And I think it's cool that they feel like they have the freedom to be like, bro, that sucks. Yeah. Don't post that, you know?
Yeah.
But in terms of like the volume, like I'm not complaining because that's the point of what I'm doing. It's a lot. And I think it's great. It does get a little tricky sometimes when I'm asking an associate, you know, hey, you have a job, you know, a 9 to 5, but we have a wedding on Friday. So there are a few of my guys that are absolutely committed to the brand, which means I'm in turn absolutely committed to them.
Yeah.
There's a couple conversations ongoing now where it's like, look, we're trying to really branch out into other areas, and I want you guys to be really heavily involved in that. So I think it's really great, you know, that, and in fact, it's humbling that they're committed like they are, you know.
Definitely.
But they commit their weekends to the amount of volume. So like right now, it's not a big deal. Like I've got a really big wedding this weekend. And then I have a elopement in the Tetons in February, but that's pretty much it until, I've got one in March, and then April, it's like Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
And then May, it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then June, it trails off. So imagine that, like 2 or 3 weddings every weekend multiplied by 2 or 3 times. So it gets kind of crazy, but
that's
it's
awesome.
Fun. Like, we've had to have some systems put in place. Obviously, like I suffer big time from ADHD. So trying to run a business with so many moving parts can be really tragic for me if I don't have the right people in place.
Definitely.
So I have an assistant. She helps me with a lot of the logistics. So all I need to do is show up, and everything's in my phone. And I've made it clear to her, like, look, if it's not in my phone, I'm lost.
It's not in the email.
Nope. Right. It's gotta be there. If it's not there, I'm not going to do it. Like, it's just the way it is. So
that's cool.
Anyway,
what,
I was kind of
2 questions. One is is that assistant full time? I know some, a lot of associate studios, eventually they get to that 90 wedding a year mark. It seems like it's kind of the starter mark to where, hey, we hired on a studio manager / assistant.
Right.
This person is, their sole goal is kind of hanging out in Honeybook, arranging client stuff, shipping packages, all that kind of admin stuff. And then secondly, how has this kind of system and kind of explosion of growth, if you will, like, one, what does Sam get to focus on now? Like, do you have a limit of weddings that you shoot for yourself, or do you still kind of prioritize and say, hey, if I'm available, I'm first in line because we'll make the most revenue? And then twofold, second part of that question is, are there things that you're doing to help, be committed to that team? Are you, once a month, hey, we're just going to hang out and I'm going to pay for you guys. We're just going to go to the bar, hang out, or we're going to go on like a company retreat, or, those kind of like, I think a lot of freelancers don't think in like big company kind of ways.
Right.
But
yeah,
big companies, holiday parties are done for a reason. It's for camaraderie amongst the workforce.
Right.
Like we had our first quote unquote company party last year, and invited a bunch
awesome.
of, it was for my 30th birthday. So I was like, oh, we can kind of play this up and the business can pay for it. And I was like, well, I'm going to invite all my clients from from ever. And it was just really fun. I think for me, it aligned with my brand in the sense of like, I believe all my clients could be friends.
Right.
Like I feel like especially in DC, everybody's a lawyer, everybody's trying to save the world, everybody's in tech, everybody's on the hill. And I'm just like, y'all, what if you didn't have to do life alone? Like these people are real people, and I've done the deep work of getting to know them. I can vouch for them. And so it was really, really, really cool. And then we did I bought out a section at Nat Stadium and invited all of our clients, and just had like a Nats night, just sort of kind of like one on my end. I was like, I want to do something that's just different for marketing. Like, I think brides, at least mine, I feel like they're tired of going to the wedding shows and looking at, I don't know, calligraphy. I'm like, what if they like they're in DC, they love the Nats, they're gonna go there anyway. Like two of my couples already had season tickets, so they're like, oh, don't give the tickets to us, we'll just come say hi. And it was so cool.
That's sick.
Yeah, so I want to know, tell me a little bit more about that as far as like the bigger vision with you guys and how you lead your team, going backwards. How many you take for yourself, and then is your assistant full time?
Yeah, well, so my assistant, that is her job. Like her job is Honeybook. Her job is logistics. Her job is everything that you described. I think I've told her, if you want to grow and to progress into something else, then by all means, provide that value for me and let's do it. And that's sort of my mantra or motto for most things. I don't ever say no to a raise, ever. You show me that your value is there, then I'll give it to you. If you want to move or change positions, I mean, that's just what we were taught in a corporate environment. Like, just because you're an admin or you clean toilets doesn't mean you can't be a software engineer. It doesn't mean you can't be a VP. Just show your value. When my very first corporate job, my boss told me, look, the average salary here in Northern Virginia is like $80,000-$90,000 a year. We're going to give you X amount of shares, and I'm going to pay you $30,000 a year. And you have to prove to me over the next 6 months by hitting these markers that you are worth more money. And it drove me to become a better employee, which I think is a great mindset. I don't think that's universal for everybody, but ultimately it goes back to what you and I talked about privately, like who you hire and what they are matters more than their talent level. But anyway, so my assistant, she's fantastic. She's great. She does a great job, and she really is motivated to do more. And I think that just helps the business function on a much more efficient level. She's constantly reaching out to me like, hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z. Hey, I want to change X, Y, and Z. And I've had past assistants where I had to tell them like, look, I don't have the emotional or mental capacity to chase you down. I just don't. And that means things are going to fall by the wayside. I need somebody in this position who's going to drive the bus. I can't. I'm doing other things.
Yeah.
So I don't have the capacity to do what you are doing. And she's really great at that. She's basically like the nerve center. And she makes everything work smoothly. And her name's Katie, by the way. She's great.
That's awesome.
So in terms of like creating like time with my associates, like I think what we're talking about ultimately is, and these are buzzwords I think everybody hears, and it sounds cliche, but it's true, like creating a culture in your organization that fosters, X, Y, and Z. So for us, it's a comfortability. I think what I heard early on from my associates when I first started was like, you are really hard to approach and you are very intimidating. And I think part of that is because I sort of had this persona of I say and do whatever I want. And like, I think some people find nobility in that. I think ultimately what they really were saying is like, oh, you're kind of a dick sometimes. So I had to really work, kind of smooth out the rough edges. And my wife helps with that. Like, she's the sweetest, nicest, kindest, most thoughtful person in the world.
AKA the only person that would marry a dick. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Like, that's how it works. Like
exactly.
I told a buddy of mine the other day, and I was like, I think any freelancer, entrepreneur, anybody of any greatness, whether it be, like a Tom Brady kind of thing or Michael Jordan or LeBron, you do have to have an element, and maybe it is unfounded, and maybe it's like a chip on the shoulder kind of thing. But you have to have a little element of like being a dick. Maybe not 50%, maybe not 100%, maybe just 10. You're like, I am going to take this parking spot, or I'm going to try, right. You believe that I have the ability to make this happen. It's just not manifested yet, using a like cheesy term. And
right.
So anyway, that's just a side conversation. But anyway, back to you.
No, I think that's honestly, like, I think what you're saying is 100% true. And I don't want to discount the fact that I probably was a dick sometimes, but I think whatever it is that makes Michael Jordan a dick, and I'm not comparing myself to Michael Jordan. I'm just using that analogy. Like, well, yeah, whatever that is, whatever that makes him a dick in those moments, it's also the same thing that made him the greatest basketball player of all time. It's the same thing that makes Tom Brady the greatest quarterback of all time. And I think it's hard for people to relate. I often joke about, this idea of like, hey, we're all in this together, or, competition is silly. I'm like, all right, maybe. Like, I'm definitely, I said it earlier, I'm there to help whoever wants help. But also at the same time, it keeps me sharp. It keeps me watching what other people are doing. I think if you can see that in a healthy way, it will keep your head down. It'll keep your eyes on the prize, so to speak.
Definitely.
And I think the thing that some photographers, not all, have a hard time relating to is the idea that I was an athlete, both in high school and college. So the idea of competition is not foreign to me. It is definitely a big driver for me. Like, if you're not competing with yourself and you're not competing with others, then what are you doing? Like, what do you do if that's not? And I know that but other people don't relate that way. I'm not saying that's universally true. For me, that works. Like, the idea of the rising tide slogan doesn't jive with me. I think what they're doing, the organization, is great, but for me, I want to help who I'm going to help, and I love when people ask me questions. But the idea of competition it's really important to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm on a tangent now. Sorry. The culture that we're trying to build within our organization is like, I'm trying to foster growth. Number one, like, I tell these guys, like, look, you guys are going to be out on your own one day, and that's fine. Like, I start with that premise. I'm going to give you all of the tools that you need to take what I'm doing and multiply it by 10. I'm giving you a head start. You don't have to deal with what I dealt with, trying to figure out what is, or the right way, what is the wrong or the right way to do this. I'm going to tell you, this is the right way to do it. I'm going to show you how to interact with the bride and groom on the day of. I'm going to show you when you should get involved, and I'm going to show you when you should back off. So that's kind of the baseline, right? Like, I know that one day Ellie is going to have a really successful business on her own. I really hope that she doesn't, and not that she fails, but I hope that she stays with me forever.
Yeah.
I hope RJ never leaves. RJ is like my right hand. Like,
I see him in all your Instagram stories.
What's that?
I said I see him in all your Instagram stories. Like, I don't know who he is, but I know that he's with you. So
yeah, he's the guy that I shoot with when I'm travel, like he's my guy. He's my travel guy, but he shoots a lot of primary for me too. He probably shoots the most primary for me. So these are people that not only I'm doing business with, but like I genuinely love them. I love Tyler. Tyler is like this super smart, like tack sharp, talented, technically proficient photographer. And I really love that guy. So these are people that like, I kind of feel like they're my kids a little bit, and I'm trying to set them up for future success.
Yeah.
So even in the way that we hang out, we have these get-togethers. Like the last one we did was a big, like I grilled for everybody, and I had I wanted to have a bounce house, but the storm, like we had a really bad storm, so we did axe throwing in my driveway instead. We had a guy come in, and it was fun. Like just doing stuff like that. Like I think maybe this summer I'm going to try to get like a week at the beach with them.
That'd be awesome.
I'm going to try. Yeah. Just, I think it's important that, I think you referenced it earlier. Like you're talking about the brides, like, hey, I want to get to know these people. Like, I think it's important that if these people are in your team and you're building something together, you should know A, what you're building, and B, who you're building it with. Otherwise, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered along the way, and that just slows things down. And then you find out this guy's not really a fit. This isn't working. And I generally don't have that problem. I generally don't ask somebody to join us that is going to be a problem down the road. And I think it's because I've kind of not perfected, but I've figured out the process, if that makes any sense.
No, 100%. I mean, it's something, this applies to, I think, any of your clients in any business, and then you're with your team. And I think that's something that the idea of people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That kind of thing where it's, again, wedding day, like, listen, I think photography is the baseline of what we do on wedding day. And like, it should be assumed that you know how to light. It should be assumed that you know where to find soft light for the parent photos. It should be assumed that, you can, that reception's probably going to be dark. Like that stuff, is base level. It should be assumed that you remember your SD cards. But the soft skills, like, hey, what's the relationship with the moms like? What were those emails? Did you read your questionnaire? Like I always ask, like, hey, are there any family sensitivities I should know about? And in DC, there are many. And so I'm just like, cool. Like, did you read that? Are you aware? What is happening? How are you stretching portraits longer because you want to get a badass shot and fulfill your own destiny, or is the couple actually having a good time? And and those are weird things, right? Like those are, I don't know. Those are things that all of us had to learn. And I just never been that guy. This is kind of off topic. I've never been that guy that was like, you have to do this for me so that I can make this happen. It's always been like, say like a night shot, for example, or anything. It's always go up, present this cool opportunity, describe it in a, sell it to them and say, hey, we're already ready. It'll take 90 seconds. Do you want to take a breather outside? And they're like, hell yeah, that breather sounds great.
Yeah, we need a break anyway.
Versus like, I want a really cool photo of you guys and you need to come outside right now. And I'm just like, that is not how we need to, sell this. Like, sell it for them. Like, guys, there's something happening outside that is incredible and doesn't happen often. And I think would just like really capstone the end of your day. And you're like, damn, yes, take my photo in the stars, or whatever. But that's just a communication thing too. That's, for me, I feel like that's my strongest suit, is like communicating and being able to sell something, like the features over the benefits, or the benefits over the features to somebody, and just being like, hey, let's get you into this. So it's,
I think that gets lost on a lot of people. The idea of like, when you break this down to its very basic core, you're selling a service, and the best people at their job are the best communicators in terms of sales. And I don't just mean a sales pitch, a verbal pitch. It's like, it's how you communicate with a bride on the day of, that's a sales pitch that she's going to give to somebody else down the road.
Yep.
I think that's a great email. When you get an email, it's like, hey, you shot so-and-so's wedding. I have a bride right now. I was laughing with RJ about this yesterday. She's replied back to me like, this email is probably 15 or 16 emails back and forth now, where it's like, hey, are you available on this date? Are you available on this date? What about this date? What about this date? And she's finally getting to the point where she's pushing her wedding out to 2021. because we're not available on the dates that she wants to get married. And it's because she was at a wedding that was shot. She saw the images, of course. I think the images are part of the story.
Yeah.
But the majority of the story is what she witnessed, how we handled the bride and groom on the day of.
Yeah.
I always tell in any conference or any workshop we do, I always tell the story about you referenced the communication, like, are you reading communication, the awkward situations?
Yeah.
I had a bride, oh, so bad. I had a bride email me and tell me her mom was dead. Well, I didn't read that. I didn't read the communication. This is like year 2.
Oh my gosh.
And also, Sam, read the room. She's not there. There was no mom helping her put the dress on. And then you get to the ceremony and there's a picture of a mom in a wedding dress with a candle. Like, all of those things. Read the room, dummy. And when it comes time for portraits, I'm up there like clapping, snapping. Mom, where's mom? Hey, mom, where you at? Mom, come on, where you at? We got to take this photo, mom. Dude, somebody finally just grabbed my arm and they're like, dude, mom died like 6 weeks ago. I was like, sick, cool. I'm going to go, I'm going to leave. You guys keep your money. Dude, I was so embarrassed.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
So bad. And then I tell this other story, this is more of a success. You've learned, okay, selling is much bigger than just what you're telling people. But I had this other couple, and I just treated them the way that I felt like I wanted to be treated, and paid attention to detail, paid attention to what they were doing, what they needed, took, really great photos they loved. And they turned into like 40 to 45 future weddings. It was crazy. Whoa. Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, like, I owe them so much. Their name is Jeff and Lauren Turner. They're in Northern Virginia. I see them like 2 or 3 times a year at a wedding because they referred me to somebody. So it's pretty awesome.
That is crazy. They're in the know, man. They are in it.
Yeah, that's right.
That's crazy. Right. There was a guy in Philly, this guy named Mike Morby. He's a super great guy. He's been on the podcast before. He runs an associate studio. And in talking with him, it was totally kind of unrelated. I think this was maybe 3-4 years ago. I first moved to DC and I was kind of like feeling out DC. And I just had a client, we'll say, acquisition process, like from inquiry to meeting to, pre-booking. And the whole process was just a lot more than at the time I was ready for. And it still just didn't feel right.
Right.
It was like, I met with the bride. I was in Orlando for a shoot and I was like, she was like, hey, I see you're going to Orlando on Instagram. Like, can we meet now? I live in Orlando. And I was like, okay. So I met there. And then when I landed, her mom was waiting for me at a coffee shop. So I like land from the airport in DC and take the Uber to this coffee shop with all my bags. And I meet this person I've never met before. Meet this mom. She asked me all the same questions the bride did that I answered, a few days earlier.
Right.
And I'm still like, okay, let's feel this out. And it just didn't feel right in general. And then, I was still new, but I had some good answers to good questions. So the mom says, right, hey, we're not interested in, or we'd love to negotiate on the initial deposit. At the time I was doing 50-50. Right. And she goes, I would love to do something different. If we could do like 1,000 down or whatever. And at the time, because this was so, things just didn't feel right. That's when you kind of have to hold your ground to your filter, if you will, just to kind of see, what happens. You have to keep your train tracks together, if you will. And so I'm just like, hey, in order to be fair to our clients who've already booked and are kind of on that same wavelength, I want to make sure that I honor them, in their decision making. And so we only do 50-50. That's just how we do it. And she just goes, well, they wouldn't have to know. And I was like, okay, yeah, we're not going to make this happen. I turned down the wedding. I think it's like the only wedding I've ever turned down. So, but I called my buddy and I told him the story of the high maintenance bride and high maintenance mom, and and he gives me some guidance. He gives me some old man dad guidance, and he says, Adam, anytime I've had a bride like that and I've booked them, I've just gone into the wedding and loved the crap out of them, and, you know, made sure I was on my A game, like did my best. And I booked so many weddings from those weddings because their friends saw how I was with their high maintenance friend and said, "Oh yeah, this is the guy." And it was such good perspective, you know. And obviously, it's not to say like, "Hey, if it doesn't feel right and you want to say no, if you're not running a 7-person associate program, you know, say no."
Right.
But it was just a reminder of like, hey, like, you know, it's their first time getting married too, and you know, they're trying to figure this out, and maybe your process is whatever. And if you're not strong and have like your own ironed out process, then yeah, they're going to make the process their own, and it is going to feel weird. And then you're just going to be like, I don't know. So anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had the same conversation with a planner recently where, you know, they were concerned because the mom of the bride was really involved. The mother of the bride was asking things of this person that they weren't accustomed to doing.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately I was like, I think the issue is, and I think a lot of us do this, we insert our own personal feelings into whatever's occurring in the moment. Like it's whether it's an attack on how we do business, or it's an attack on our integrity, or I don't love the way that feels to me. We don't really account for the other person, what they're dealing with in that moment. Like, and ultimately, like you said, you're turning down an opportunity, like to, number one, educate, and number two, that's, you know, if you're playing the long money game, that could turn into a lot of contracts down the road. And I will say this, I'll preface that by saying that there are just sometimes you should just not work with that client.
Yeah.
Like I've had those where you're like, oh my gosh, I did everything I could, and this was a mistake. But, you know, I mean, sometimes it just takes you getting out of the way of yourself and being like, all right, let me just try to understand where this person is coming from. And it goes a long, long way.
Yeah, 100%. What is, wrapping up here, what is one thing you would say to photographers or anybody who's trying to get into the, you know, managing a team? And, you know, what would you say? What's your one Sam Stroud piece of advice?
Oh boy, that's a good one. You'd think I'd have like something on the ready for that, because I get asked a lot. Or more succinctly, I think the biggest thing that people aren't prepared for when building out a team is the lack of control you have. You know, I send my guys out to a wedding, or girls, and I don't have any control over what happens after they get in the car and head that way. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you know, RJ could be having a bad day, and we had a wedding. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. I had a wedding where this bride was very, very interested in getting published. She was very, very interested in the details of her wedding.
Yeah.
Very, very interested in a lot of things that we're just not interested in, but we will accommodate for. And she called me and she said, I need to talk to you about something that happened. And I was like, okay. And she said, your photographer was in the bathroom just totally disparaging me in the room. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, that's great. Like in my mind, I'm going, oh my gosh, this is it. My business is over. It's done.
Yep.
So it's things like that. And well, let me finish that story.
Yeah, finish the story, man.
It ended up not being true. Like it was a total, like I just had to ask a couple of very basic questions to figure out very quickly. Like, no, that didn't happen. Like she said her maid of honor heard them in the bathroom. And I was like, okay, just briefly, how was your maid of honor in the guys' room? Like in the bathroom? She was like, oh, that's a really great point. Maybe outside the bathroom? And I was like, all right, let me just say this. Like, this is the kind of person that would never, if you caught him swearing, I would be surprised, let alone talking. Like, he's just a nice guy. Anyway, but it's things like that. Like, you just have to prepare yourself. Like, there are things that just happen that you have no control over. So like, take anything that you've ever dealt with negatively at a wedding and then multiply that across 3 weddings in a weekend. Or, you know, instead of 3 weddings in a month, now we're talking 6 to 9 weddings in a month.
Yeah.
Like, how are you going to manage that? Do you have the capacity? And I think one of my weaknesses in not having the capacity emotionally to deal with, you know, a lot of the details. Like I just really struggle with ADHD, like beyond, it's crazy how hard it is. Like I can't even tell you where my phone is right now. And I know that it was down here with me a second ago, but like, I think that one thing that I struggle with and manage really well is also the same thing that allows me to manage a team and all of the stressors that come with that. You have to just be able to distance yourself from any problem, any solution, anything that's going on, good or bad. You have to distance yourself from that and assess it for what it is, and then re-engage so that you can deal with it properly. And I think that gets lost on people a lot. I think the stress of that, I don't think a lot of people are prepared for. So I tell people all the time, like, just plan for the worst. And when the worst happens, don't take it personally. Like I said, take a step back. It's one of like the great, Jocko Willenick is, I always forget his last. He's always on Rogan. He's a great read, great listen. It's one of like his core leadership tenets is like the ability to detach is so crucial in leading a group of people, because you get so emotionally invested in what you're doing, especially with what we're doing. Like, we're so bought in. It's an emotional time already. We're incorporating other people now into what we're doing. Like, it's so hard to not get emotionally involved. But if you can detach for a little bit, not too far and not too close from a problem or a solution, then you can effectively lead these other people into, marching out this brand awareness or this idea that you're trying to incorporate with brides and grooms. So I think that's the biggest thing. Sorry, that's sort of it's not succinct, but I think people just are not prepared for the amount of stress that comes with managing that many weddings on a day, if that makes sense.
No, 100%. That makes perfect sense. We had one associate wedding last year as kind of like a trial, just for fun. Hey, let's just see how this works. See if there are any kinks. It was with a guy I trusted, and he did great. He did awesome. Clients were happy, 5 out of 5 stars, but the whole day I'm at this other wedding trying to be my best Adam Mason. Yeah. And I'm just thinking about that other wedding, I'm just dying. Like, what is going on? Is everything okay?
What's happening?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you just have to, like, if you've done the work ahead of time, I think I told you this, like, if you've vetted the people, if you've done the work that was necessary, like I tell this story all the time with Tyler. There was no doubt in my mind I was hiring Tyler, because I talked to everybody that knew Tyler before Tyler knew I talked to them. So I talked to people that were like not that close to him. I talked to people that maybe didn't have really great things to say about him. I talked to people, that were really close to him, and they all echoed the same thing. That dude cares about what he's doing, and he's a solid guy, and he knows what he's doing. So when I sat down to talk to him, like, I knew I was hiring him. It wasn't an issue of that. It was just like, I want to confirm my hunch on this guy. So when you do the process ahead of time, that's my point. I'm rambling. The point that I'm making is, like, it's much easier to relieve yourself of what's going on. And then after a while, like, it sort of sinks in, like you settle into this groove. Like, I know when RJ's shooting a wedding, dude, I have nothing to worry about. Yeah. And if something comes up, that dude's got it.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's cool. Well, sweet, man. I appreciate all this. This has been really, really fun. Of course. What do you got coming up? This episode will come out after we've met at Creative Summit, so that sucks. Sorry. Yeah. Anybody who was there, awesome. If you weren't, great. Talk about podcast planning. But what do you have coming up? And then where can people go to find you and just say that they love the episode and love what you had to say, man?
Yeah. We really push Instagram. I think that's where it's at Sam Stroud Photography. That's a real big focus for us. I think it's where we've really put a lot of energy and effort into allowing, brides to see the kind of work we do across the board. And then also, like, I feel like you can really get to know who we are through our Insta stories. We're kind of doing stupid stuff all the time. So Instagram is a big push for us. samstroudphoto.com, obviously our website. But in terms of like what's coming up, I mean, yeah, we'll have already been at Creative. I do have another, I'm supposed to be speaking at WPPI, but I'm not like fully committed to that yet. So I'm not totally sure. That's in March, but I'm not sure I'm going to do that, man. I did it a couple, or I was asked a couple years ago, and then I don't know, I struggle a lot of times with speaking at conferences only because I don't even know if I want to get into that, because it like sort of challenges an idea that I have about business. But
yeah,
I'm speaking at Creative, so how much do I really believe that?
Well, here's the difference is I feel like I can guess where you're at, but Orlando in January is very attractive. You could say, hey, there's a satanic conference down there I need you to speak at it, and I'd be like, all right, I'm probably in, like, all right,
I'll go.
Yeah. Whereas, there's something I've had to wrestle with it. Like, I think once you do something I do for the mentees, we do this like a profitability analysis. And the first time it's very depressing, and it should be like, but I think the idea is kind of like, guys, like, I don't know. I love to hear myself talk. You do as well. Like, we have podcasts, right? Like, right. But how worth it is it, for me to leave, family, for me to be in Vegas or wherever for 4 days. And yeah, networking is awesome. Camaraderie is awesome. And I say this as a guy who's going to meet you in a few weeks, and it's going to be great. But it's like, would you take those 4 days off just to hang with the wife, or would you take those 4 days off to work on team stuff, and right. And that's hard, unless you're getting paid like a decent amount and it's good. It's really hard to make it worth it in the same way. And it can come off really bad, but I think it's just one of those things where it's like, you have to kind of pick and choose. Does it feel right? If you're creative, for me, it was like, all right, I want to help Devin, and, this is kind of fun. It seems very much like the vibe, whereas I've been asked to speak at Rising Tide stuff, and I'm like, oof, I feel like a rebel.
Nah.
Yeah. And I love those people, but I'd be like, I'm the only guy in the room, one. And so I'm like, hey, right. What's up? And I think too, it's just different, and it's harder. The better your business grows, the harder it is to do anything else that doesn't make you money or give your time back.
Yeah. And I hold pretty true to a philosophy that, we are products of the decisions we make, the choices we make, on a micro and macro level. So anything that occurs today is a direct result of a decision I made earlier. So I think sometimes attendees come to conferences with this mindset of like, you are going to give me the fast track. Like, you are going to help me get to X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And sometimes the thing, it's honestly why I've stopped for the most part. I've kicked around the idea of doing another workshop, but the reason I've stopped doing workshops is because sometimes I just want to say, listen, yes, there are technical things that you need to change. There are small things in the way you do business that you need to change. But the reality is I am successful because I chose to work harder than most.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't mean that to sound arrogant, and I don't mean that to sound like I know more than everybody. I don't. There are many times I wake up and go, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, holy crap, what's going to happen today? But I do believe that I see people's work that just blows my mind, and then see them say they're struggling to book 15, 20 weddings. And I'm like, how did I last year shoot 60 weddings myself? How is that possible?
That's insane.
And I think it's legitimately because I've committed to just outworking everybody. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No. 100%. I mean, 60 weddings, that'll get you there. That's gonna be the thing.
Right.
You're a madman. Well, dude, thank you so much. I appreciate you, and can't wait to see you in 2 weeks and hang out. And everybody will be jealous.
Be fun.
People will be like, "How do these guys already know each other? Like, why can't we have a friendship, friendship like theirs?" And be like, "Yeah."
The bromance.
Yeah, 100%, man. I appreciate you. Next time you're in DC, Starbucks Americano on me. And
oh, heck yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for everything, man. And I hope you enjoy your time, and I'll see you in a few weeks, man. Oh, it feels so good to have Sam on. He's an absolute monster. I mean, he is a guy to me that I just look up to. I feel like he's somebody who represents longevity in the business, which I think when you're 25, you don't care about, but when you're 30, you're thinking like, okay, what are my next steps? And not that he's old, but it's just he's a few years ahead of me, and it's like, okay, what is my path here? How does this work? I think when I first started, I didn't think about how can I pay for my house, or how can I have like a normal life with this freelance income. And now we've achieved a normal life. And for Sam, it's kind of like, okay, how can we expand or shift or grow and do something different, or do the same thing but bigger? And I just loved his insight. I mean, you guys, you got a ton of stuff out of that episode, I hope. And if you saw Set Creative, thank you so much for saying hi. It was awesome to be there. Orlando, love that spot. And so good to have Sam on. I would encourage you guys, check out the Patreon if you haven't, patreon.com/thebeardedtog. Would love to see a review on iTunes, of course. There are no ads or sponsorships on this podcast, and most likely maybe never will be, just because we're a tribe, guys. We're a small tribe of bearded people. And so I'm just super, super, super thankful for all of you. Love your support of the podcast and where it's going in 2020. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day. Keep being awesome.